Welcome to a little bit different broadcast of Catching Up with Jacob. Our good friend Marco Quintana is not with us today. I will be sitting in his seat, which is a huge seat to fill. Just want to welcome our guests, of course, starting with Jacob Prash.
Blessings in Jesus from New York City.
We also have, of course, David Lister from the East Coast as well.
It's good to be here.
Good to see you, my brother.
In the beautiful Bible Belt of the South.
Amen. Finally, all the way in Australia, Davey, how are you doing, my brother?
Yeah, not too bad, thanks. Not too bad. Doing pretty good, thanks.
Awesome. And just want to remind everybody that this will be available in podcast. We always take this episode and upload it for podcasts. You can find us on many different platforms, from Spotify to Apple Podcasts, Amazon Podcasts. We really give you a lot of selection there. We are streaming also this on Rumble, Facebook, YouTube, and don't forget about RTN. And unfortunately, Moriel TV will be fixed, but right now it is down. So let's get started catching up. All right. The first thing I have on our docket that we want to talk about, the Democrats are doing a bit of political maneuvering. They want to use the 14th Amendment. You brought this to my attention, David. Why don't you take it away?
Well, the 14th Amendment, and particularly Section 4, concerns public debt. And it reads very simply: the validity of the public debt of the United States authorized by law, including debts incurred for payments of pensions and bounties for services in suppressing insurrection or rebellion, shall not be questioned. But neither the United States nor any state shall assume or pay any debt or obligation incurred in aid of insurrection or rebellion against the United States, or any claim from the loss or emancipation of any slave, but all such debts, obligation to claim, shall be illegal and void. The thing is very simple. The Democrats are trying to use that section of our Constitution, the 14th Amendment, which also made sure that slaves that had been emancipated and were freed, while they can vote, they now are American citizens. So they want to use this as saying, and this is if you read what the liberals are saying, the left wants to question the validity of public debt and then skip all the stuff about insurrection and pensions, shall not be questioned. And so this was basically just saying any debts that were occurred from a slave being free, you can't sue the state. You can't sue the United States to get these claims, or if any of the states that were in rebellion against the United States, they can't claim anything. But now what the Democrats are trying to do is go around that section that says public debt authorized by law. There's only one body that makes laws, and that's the Congress. And they want to move them away from this public debt, which they have to set and which they make the budgets with, and so that the president can just make whatever debt he wants. He can runs up the bills and fund everything, which would bankrupt America. So all this goes back to Bill Clinton when he started saying, what does is mean? Just like any lawyer, they question everything. Obama tried to do it. Clinton tried to do it. Now Biden is considering doing it. But here's the danger. if he does invoke a raising of the debt, immediately there's going to be an injunction and lawsuit, and then we could pass the time of paying our debts, and it would cause us to default on our debts, which would hurt the people of the United States and the whole nation as a whole. But this is one of the reasons why Jesus said all lawyers go to hell. Although the lawyers he was speaking about are those that question the scriptures and twist them. But here you see lawyers trying to twist something, because the very clear statement is authorized by law, not by the President of the United States. So let's hope they don't try this. It will hurt America.
So the Democrats don't want checks and balances on executive power?
It's always better to rule by, whoever. We've been investing so much power in the office of the presidency and not taking it back. But now that's haunting us when we're seeing so much of what the executive branch is doing by not enforcing laws or even allowing the executive branch to the laws of the FBI, the Secret Service, the IRS to run rampant over citizens. It's crazy.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Moving on to the next topic, I wanted to talk about AOC. She is basically calling on the Republicans to support the Democrat bill on the budget to go along with your topic, and that she's claiming that Kevin McCarthy does not have the votes to get his bill passed. Therefore, why do they want to be on the losing side of history? Ocasio-Cortez, always my favorite politician. Any comments on that, guys?
Well,
Ocasio?
suppose you have an irresponsible young woman who maxes out on her credit cards, and her way of dealing with her financial crisis is to continually apply for higher card limits and demand that she get it. And if you don't give it to her, you're discriminating against her because she's a woman or because she's a member of a minority or something of this nature. This is exactly what you're dealing with Alejandra Ortega-Cortez. You're dealing with an irresponsible woman, doesn't know what she's doing, doesn't know how to manage anything. She's not an honest person. She lies a lot, has been caught lying a lot. She's maybe even a pathological liar. Certainly an astounding hypocrite. Photographs of her during the COVID in Florida, not wearing a mask. I mean, say one thing and do another. And she licks the boots of communist states like Venezuela. She doesn't even belong in this country. She should go to Venezuela, where she belongs. But be that as it may, this is what you're dealing with. She was a cocktail waitress put into power by a left-wing, West Coast, Asian American, not that that matters, political activist who made money in Silicon Valley. That's all she is. She doesn't know anything. When she gets caught, something that she can't factually deal with, she basically lies. But just think of her as an irresponsible young woman who can't balance her budget, can't assume any fiscal or financial responsibility for her life. So her mentality is just to ask for larger and larger credit limits. And if you don't give it to her, she throws a tantrum. That's exactly what that woman is. That's all she is. She's nothing more than that. She doesn't have the mental capacity to be anything more than that. What she's doing and what others like her are doing, particularly Jamal Bowman, is putting our grandchildren and great-grandchildren into further and further debt. They have no moral conscience about what they're doing to future generations or to the future of the country. First of all, they're too stupid to understand it. They're literally they lack the personal intelligence to be able to understand the consequences of kicking the proverbial can down the road and what they're doing to the next generations, having children being born with 6 figures of debt over their head. They're too stupid to know what they're doing. All they see is the short-term political interest. Give me a higher credit limit. Another member of the squad is Jamal Bowman from New York. Jamal, I don't know if he's a Muslim, it's a Muslim name. And he says Biden should not negotiate with the Republicans. Don't even negotiate, despite the fact that they narrowly control the House of Representatives, who controls the budget. They should not be negotiated with because they're terrorists. Now, this man was the mind of an animal. He has the mind of an animal. Actually calling Republicans terrorists. And you shouldn't negotiate with them because we shouldn't negotiate with terrorists. This is the subhuman level of intelligence that are being elected by people in inner cities to these positions, to their own ultimate destruction. But that's what it comes to. In the meanwhile, the people who have to live in the real world and understand the financial and economic consequences of these disastrous policies have a different perspective. Fitch, the rating agency, Fitch is getting ready to downgrade American government debt. The repercussions of downgrading the debt of the federal government are dramatic. What that will affect in terms of T-bill marketability, what that will affect in terms of asset assurance of all kinds of financial institutions, Fitch has to deal with the real world. Fitch is dealing with the real world, okay? Like Standard & Poor's have to deal with the real world. Ortega doesn't deal with the real world. She's a cocktail waitress who gets tips. And if she maxes out on her credit card, she asks for a bigger limit. And if she doesn't get it, she throws a tantrum. You're picking on me because I'm a woman or because I'm a minority or whatever. So you've got the people who live in the real world, and you've got these other people who are too stupid to even understand the situation, including Jamal Bowman, including Alejandro Ortega-Cortez. They're really, really that ignorant. 6 out of 10 Americans believe that the budget needs to be cut.
Yeah.
If there's one common sense thing to do, it's that. I'm not talking about defense budget, or I'm not talking about essential services, but I mean a lot of the rubbish we're wasting money on, like the Department of Education that does nothing to advance the cause of education, or a lot of other ridiculous things that shouldn't even exist. That's what needs to be done. 6 out of 10 people say cut government spending. But the Democrats don't care what the people say because there's nothing democratic about a Democrat. So you're dealing with a combination of rank stupidity, short-term political gain, and a bankrupt ideology, but they're too ignorant to know that's what it is. Meanwhile, the real world is the real world. And you're going to see the rating agencies devalue federal debt. United States government debt will be devalued.
Yep.
That will have further repercussions for the dollar as the global reserve currency in the present climate, as well as a lot of other ramifications. But again, you're dealing with stupid people who are too stupid to know any better.
James, if I could add one thing, the Democrats are actually struggling passing judicial nominations because Mr. Manchin from West Virginia is upset over the lies that Biden told him over his whip inflation legislation. And also, he did not like that coal is being put down and they're regulating these coal-fired plants. So it's going to hurt West Virginia. So 2 judicial nominations have pulled out their nominations. And so Biden is not getting his people put in. So there's a division within the Democratic Party as opposed to the Republican Party. The Republican Party is standing pretty firm on trying to roll back the budget to the 2022 levels to reduce things. And they want to take out like $10 billion out from the IRS. There's a number of things, but what the Democrats are screaming about is every social fund policy that was really funded in 22, now they think, oh, we're not getting enough of a raise. So this is what they're worried about. So the Democrats are struggling here too. So I think God willing, Biden's going to negotiate on some of this and at least get maybe $1 trillion, and we can move forward. So.
Wow. Huge mess. And as I recall, I believe it was Ocasio also who said that she was not being paid enough to be able to rent near where she works, and that she needs a raise. So to Jacob's earlier point, yes, a bartender that cannot afford to live the lifestyle she wants, so she wants her credit cards extended, new limits.
She should quit giving $10 million to her boyfriend, now husband, that came from her campaign funds. Maybe she'd have more money.
She could start by doing stuff like that. Moving on to our next topic, the U.S. Marshals were tracking 225 migrant children here in the United States, and found that 25% of them were 25% they found. But they have been saying that they've been winding back in Mexico. They've been doing drugs. They've been trafficked for other purposes. And they've referred 49 people for criminal charges of handling these children. So as more children are crossing the border, they're winding up into basically criminal organizations. You brought this up to me, David. Please speak a little bit more onto this.
Well, the first is good news is that 56 of these children have been found safe and in safe situations, possibly with their uncles or aunts or some relative. What most people don't know is that Biden has stopped the DNA checks at the border for people claiming children. So we're finding, as the two ladies in Congress exposed, is that people could come up, claim a child, the government turns them over. They said, oh, we're Uncle Ernie. And they found children, as many as 30 children being given to one man or one person. And these children are disappearing. And the Marshals are out looking for them. They have a program called We Will Find You. So this is just one operation that took 10 weeks to find 225 children. And we have thousands upon thousands that are missing with no help from the Biden administration on this. But they hope to recover as many as 3,000 children. So there's a long way to go. So please pray for these children. This is wretchedness and horrible what has happened to them.
Democrats scream about how they love children and how Republicans don't care about them. But when push comes to shove, they don't care about these children being trafficked, unfortunately.
That's right. That's right.
Neither do they care about the children being poisoned on a massive scale with fentanyl, particularly among minority communities.
Yes.
Yep.
That's right. So what is 1 out of 5 deaths in California are fentanyl related? Did I read that right?
Yes, it's the biggest killer between the ages of 16 and 44. The biggest killer, with the blessings of the Biden administration and the Democrats.
Yeah.
Crazy. Moving on, another issue that we're having with children. Target has recently jumped into the culture war, and they are reporting huge losses in their profits. I believe Davey mentioned 10% on their new because of their new line of children's wear. Jacob, can you talk a little bit about the economics of Target and wanting to basically, show Pride Month with your children?
It is just another company added to the list that is Anheuser-Busch, InBev, that is Disney, and now it's Target, and there will be others. They're trying to have their cake and eat it too. On one hand, they're trying to use marketing and advertising campaigns to persuade people that they're involved with mainstream values, or they're not taking sides in a culture war. Let's put it that way. They're trying to persuade their clientele that they're not taking sides in a culture war. At the same time, they are taking sides in a culture war. Now, this may be partially because of the homosexual and lesbian influence within their own management and board of directors. That may be part of it. There are also political pressures on the state and possibly even federal level. That would be another. Another, however, is as you know, living in Hollywood, the disproportionate amount of homosexual and lesbian influence in marketing, in social media marketing, and on Madison Avenue marketing in the United States and Covent Gardens in England. You'll have a lot of homosexuals in advertising. You'll have a lot of homosexuals in media and in social media. You'll have a lot of those influences. So on one hand, they don't want to lose their traditional clientele. On the other hand, they have to placate the advocates of, or the proponents of the woke agenda and so forth. They're stuck between a rock and a hard place. David is going to tell us about a website called, I believe it's called Town Square, where people can know which industries, businesses in the United States are not part of a woke agenda and that manufacture their wares within the United States economy. David, could you speak about that briefly?
It's actually called Public Square. You can
Public Square,
download
my
the app. It's free on on Apple and Google, et cetera, other places. So if you want to support American companies that haven't gone and supported the gay agenda, then check out Public Square. So they're doing really well so far. Now, also, I'd like to add to this is that Budweiser is sponsoring gay pride parades throughout this month. They didn't lose enough money, 157 billion. So now they're going back and continuing their support. The LA Dodgers, I told a guy I bleed blue because of my being a fan since I was a young man or since I was a young boy to love the Dodgers. But now after their anti-Christian fake nuns and men crawling on crucifix undressed and all sorts of craziness, they've invited them to go out and celebrate gay pride. So we have a new addition, North Face, an outdoor wear company. These people have jumped in with a person that goes by they and she, which I think they said they're a lesbian or homosexual. I'm sorry, I get mixed up. Not trying to demean anybody, but I can't keep up with all the they, thems and stuff. I'm an old man. So anyway, but it's terrible that these companies continue. Target is stock down another 1.5%, probably down 10 billion as of this point. But if people keep it up, because Target is moving their displays of swimwear that have mild tuck for boys and other such things to the back of the stores in the southern states and reducing the size of it. But it's kind of crazy. They're not removing it. They're not selling it. They're just wanting to kind of hide it in plain sight. And so people need to put a stop to this by not spending your money with them. There's other places you can spend your money on that support American products and non political options, that you don't have to fight the cultural war. If you fight a cultural war, you lose half of your audience. So just sell products. That's what America does. It sells products. They don't take a stand on politics. So,
Davey from Down Under, you had something you wanted to contribute.
Oh, I was just going to say, with this Target merchandise they've been pushing too, again, it shows you the link between the occult and the LGBTQ plus movement too. All this merchandise they were pushing was designed by a Satanist as well. And also just shows you again the violent nature of a lot of it. If you looked at a lot of the pins and stuff that they were pushing, there was like one of a guillotine with the blade coming down saying something like the tombstone of a homophobe sort of thing. A lot of them were calling for violence, for even drug use. So, and they're pushing this on kids. It's crazy, you know. So the LGBT community, Satanism, they're really trying to push mainstream now. So, Target's lost over 9 billion, and I think that was in 1 week, and I think that figure was like 2 days ago. So let's hope they continue to go work and go for it.
Lose money.
Yeah, let's help them lose money. Buy wood from other good places.
You know, something that Jacob said earlier that I just wanted to comment on, you know, I've always often looked at the infiltration of the LGBTQ in Hollywood, in academia, in politics, and often wonder why the NAR doesn't have like a workshop course of the 7 mandate, you know, a lesson how they can do the same from them. Because you want to talk about infiltration, the infiltration of the LGBT is much better than the Christians infiltrating the 7 mountains of media, politics, education, academia. You know, they're doing a terrible job of you know, making Christian morals relevant, well as, you know, LGBT, they're selling worldliness everywhere.
Yes.
They've done a good job at it. It's just the infiltration is worldwide. We're seeing it overseas everywhere. But the really money, except for in some places like Russia, from what I understand, is not going along with it. China is not going along with it, but who knows what the future holds.
Yep. Moving on to our next topic, we were going to talk a little bit about Christopher Wray, the head of the FBI. Just recently, it's come out that he has some connections with some foreign entanglements, let's call them. I believe it was it Jacob that brought this to the light? So Jacob, could you comment a little bit more on that?
Why is the media ignoring it as usual? Why is there not some kind of an uproar? We have seen the FBI and the Justice Department corrupt under the leadership of Garland and of people like Wray in the FBI, knowingly, visibly, conspicuously engaged in political corruption. Knowing the Steele dossier was a forgery paid for by the Clinton administration, obtaining FISA warrants on that basis. Where are the indictments of the FBI leadership? But now you find a real connection with foreign intelligence interests, with the CC, well, certainly with the CCP, if not Chinese intelligence. When the FBI conducted the arrests of these so-called CCP police stations in the United States with George Weong, that was the name that they gave, there were 8 or 9 accomplices. Why is it that Wray wanted them released without bail? What's going to stop them from just escaping back to China? There'll be no possibility of even bringing prosecutions against these foreign agents. But no problem for the FBI, no problem for Wray, and no problem for the mainstream media in all but ignoring it. So in other words, where you have something completely bogus propagated by unprincipled liars like Adam Schiff and Jerry Nadler and the FBI, something completely phony. But where you have something serious involving them, just as with Hunter Biden's connections with the CCP, they ignore it. A totally corrupt justice system. that does not represent justice but injustice. That's what we've got. And the media, the press, are supposed to be the safeguards, the safeguards. They're supposed to be the public watchmen protecting the public interest, providing scrutiny of the government, unmasking corruption, and they're not doing it. In fact, they seem to be, well, they are complicit in it. Again, we have the illusion of democracy. Democracy is further gone than most people realize. You can see how far it's gone in Victoria, Australia, or in Canada under Trudeau. There are certain places where you know that these countries are no longer really democratic. But the United States is not that much better. They're doing the same kinds of things. The Constitution and the Bill of Rights tend to inhibit the degree to which they do it or get away with it, but it still goes on. It's the same game.
Yes, it's unfortunate, but I wonder, does Christopher know the same people that say our congressman who was having an affair with the Chinese spy?
Yes, sure.
Swalwell? Do
Yes,
they run in
sure.
the same social circles? I have to wonder.
Yeah, but again, you've got people who will still vote for Swalwell.
Yes.
You've
Yes,
got
you do.
people who will still vote for Schiff.
Senator someday, most likely.
God forbid.
Ugh, doesn't look good. He's standing on the picket line with all the other writers, and letting people know that we have to support the unions of the writers in Hollywood.
I think
Well,
the
I don't like
producers are-
AI. I don't like AI, but sometimes evils can achieve good things. And if Hollywood liberals are being made penniless and thrown out of their jobs, I think that's a good thing. I share all the fears of AI everyone else does, right up to Revelation chapter 13. But if Hollywood liberals are losing their jobs, their careers, their livelihoods because of it, that is a positive benefit of it.
Disney is definitely using it as a cudgel to kind of clean the wokeness out of Disney. So let's see what happens. They'll just program the AI to probably be even worse and more
That's
woke
right.
than the writers.
Our writers and producers didn't do this. AI did it.
Exactly. Don't blame us. It was the AI, and it's completely impartial.
Yeah.
Completely. All right, moving on to our next topic. This week we saw in U.S. politics the launch of two new bids for the presidency. We have Governor Ron DeSantis of Florida, launching his campaign for the presidency on Twitter. We'll talk about that, but also Tim Scott launching his bid for the presidency. And let's go back to DeSantis first, and let's talk about that because there is a little bit of controversy about his launch on Twitter. Whoever wants to take it away.
Well, it's being attributed to multiple things. The lieutenant governor of Florida said so many people were trying to access it caused the system to crash. Well, that could be one explanation. Others are saying it was sabotage by Silicon Valley. That could be another explanation. We don't know what it is, but we do know that systems are rigged. This is for sure. I don't know about what caused the technical complications in his launch. I just know about what he said in his speech concerning his launch. And although I don't have any indication he's a believer or anything of this nature, I did agree with the things he said. I did, at least in principle, agree with the things he said. And I personally trust him more than I trust Donald Trump at this point, following the gala at Mar-a-Lago and the disaster that Trump and McConnell made of the midterm elections. I have more confidence in Mr. DeSantis, who really did have a red wave.
Absolutely. And David, Tim Scott, do you have any insight on what a presidency under him would be if he were to somehow miraculously beat down
When
Uh,
I got a couple of things. When Tim Scott first came out, I liked him. I listened to him. I listened to his message. I checked him out. He seemed all good. I even supported him financially. But what happened is during this last election term, he supported Miss McCluskey as senator. Murkowski, sorry, thank you. Murkowski in Alaska, which had been manipulated into a jungle primary, and she won in a runoff against a good conservative woman. And he endorsed McCluskey, and I will not be endorsing him anymore. That shows me he's a rhino and supporting another rhino that voted for abortion. So I don't trust him anymore.
I agree with David. I liked him very much at first, very much. But he's demonstrated himself to be a rhino who can't be trusted. Additionally, I think politically, when I see someone like him coming in as a kind of dark horse candidate out of nowhere, unexpected announcement, that tells me two things. One, he may actually be running to be vice president to get on a ticket. Or the second is he's setting himself up for a future presidential election, not in 24, but in 28. Those are the kind of things that are usually driving the candidacy of people who spring up and enter a race, throw their hat in the proverbial ring as he did.
Yeah, he could be also looking for furthering his career as a department head, a cabinet head, things like this, that spring term that can spring him down the road a little further, so very possible.
all right. We talked a little bit about General Miley and how he wanted to specifically, he's stepping down from the Joint Chiefs, and he wanted CQ Brown Jr., who is an Air Force general, to replace him. Is this a case of like wanting like? Is this a person that is trying to set up his heir because he wants to make sure that in posterity he's looked at better? Comment a little bit about CQ Brown Jr. and what you guys know.
If Biden is looking to appoint him to succeed Miley, and if Miley is recommending him, that tells you they are cut from the same piece of cloth. Instead of having a Pentagon bent on national defense, it's pushing everything from climate change to woke agendas instead. This is how sick and perverted the military has become. Enlistments are down as a result. Morale is extremely low as a result of the policies of the Biden administration and Miley. Now, if Miley, who one of the mistakes Donald Trump made was not firing him, if Miley actually made those telephone calls to the communist Chinese behind the back of Donald Trump when Donald Trump was still commander-in-chief, Miley should have been court-martialed. He should have been court-martialed, and if proven guilty, die in Leavenworth. He should die in Leavenworth. He's a terrible, disgusting human being, but he's an absolute disgrace to the military heritage of America. He's a foul, cheap politician dressed in a general's uniform. That's what he is. That's all he is. Something else I would say concerning CQ Brown. When you have the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, you have a problem. Most of them have been Army simply because the Army is the biggest branch of the military numerically, okay? The Navy, if you include the Marines, would make more sense in the sense that it fights on land, sea, and air if you include the Marines. It covers all theaters. The problem with the Air Force, and it's sub-force within the Air Force, the Space Force, is that it is monofocal. It does not see things in terms of terrestrial warfare or naval warfare. It's very much focused on aerospace warfare. The last chief of staff we had who was from the Air Force was Davy Jones, who was responsible for the horrible abortion of the hostage rescue attempt in Iran under Jimmy Carter. Carter appointed an Air Force general who didn't really know what he was doing. He really did not know what he was doing for a terrestrial operation of that nature. Air Force generals are good for aerospace. They are not good at maintaining an overview involving naval, amphibious, terrestrial forces, as well as aerospace forces. So an Air Force general is a bad pick anyway. But now you have another woke loser waiting in the wings.
U.S. military is in disarray for sure. Kind of on that note, looking at Ukraine, this week, Russia took the city of Bakhmut. The Ukrainians are basically supposedly withdrawing to fight in another day. There's a very few pockets left of resistance in that city. Let's talk about Ukraine and the continued conflict between Russia and Ukraine being backed by NATO forces.
Well, as we've said, it's a proxy war between NATO and Russia now. Ukraine is simply cannon fodder. The devastating casualties of Ukrainian forces and Ukrainian civilians is absolutely shocking. The media has lied, the White House has lied, NATO has lied, number 10 Downing Street has lied. The Ukrainians have not done nearly as well as the official narrative tries to convince the public it has. On the other hand, Russia has not done nearly as badly. It's done badly, and it's taking effect now economically and in terms of young people leaving the country and things like this, brain drain. It has had its impact, but the Russian economy has not been hurt nearly as bad as we've been told. Now, it's hard to know how badly it has been hurt because they're not giving verifiable independent statistics. Like China, you can't believe what they say. They're saying they're doing better than they are. On the other hand, NATO was saying they're doing worse than they are. The truth is somewhere in the middle. Remember, this is blown up in Putin's face. It's blown up in his face. Now, in addition to Finland and Sweden joining NATO, creating another 800 miles of border with a NATO country for Russia. Now, even Ireland is readdressing its traditional neutrality and questioning should it become a member of NATO. This is blown up in Putin's face. It has strengthened NATO. It has strengthened European resolve. It has strengthened defense spending in Europe, especially in Britain. So, and the fact that the Germans are willing to suffer a recession as a result of what's happening in Ukraine and their reduced reliance on, or their non-reliance now upon Russian oil and natural gas, this is blown up in Putin's face. It is hurting him economically, howbeit not to the degree that the Western narrative has insisted it has, but it has hurt him strategically. It has very much hurt him strategically. I disagree with those people who say he's not a Stalinist, that he's not trying to resurrect. I don't think he's trying to resurrect the Warsaw Pact or the Soviet Union, but he's got Belarus. He wanted Georgia. He's taken Crimea, and he has designs on Moldavia, between Romania and Ukraine. He is an imperialist. He's a Russian imperialist. That's what he is. Those who are saying he isn't, and that we should try to somehow let him have what he wants, he's never going to be placated with what he wants. The only way out of this is negotiation. Only way out of this is negotiation. But Russia is paying a price for its gains. How strategically important this Russian victory has been is debated. Some say it opens up other areas of Ukraine to further Russian incursion. Others say it's not strategically important. It was only symbolically important for propaganda purposes inside Russia. Again, the truth is probably somewhere in the middle. You can't trust or believe what NATO's saying, and you certainly cannot trust or believe what Putin is saying. Or neither can you trust or believe what Zelensky is saying.
Kind of on the back of the war in Ukraine, this week we had the UK increasing its defense budget. Jacob, you brought this up. The UK, the United Kingdom, is increasing their defense budget. Has to be in direct correlation, partially at least, to the war in Ukraine.
Absolutely. That's been the leading factor presented by the present government. But there is more to it than that. Now that Brexit is extricated from Europe, it is not as capable of strategic and tactical interaction with continental-based NATO forces. It needs to become more independent just to be functional. Something else, I don't know to what degree it figures into the thinking of Biden, but there have been conservative, in Australia, the conservatives are called liberals, don't ask me why. Certainly the Trump administration and the British Tory government have talked about strengthening the Five Eyes, and bringing India hopefully into it as an English-speaking country. It's the world's largest English-speaking country, the world's largest nominal democracy, although it's not truly democratic. With this, the French were dealt out of the submarine contracts in Australia. They're being replaced by Anglo-American submarine technology, partly Australian manufactured. The English-speaking countries have had the Five Eyes in terms of intelligence, GCHQ in Britain, the NSA in the United States, and so forth. And I think it's called Pine Bluffs in Australia, and so forth. What they're trying to do now is make not only a strategic partnership, but an economic partnership between Canada, the United States, Great Britain, possibly India, and Australia, New Zealand. This would be a trade bloc within a trade bloc, and would be able to stand against the EU, and it will be able to stand against BRICS, because it is capable of total food independence and total energy independence, near total mineral independence. Some countries have energy independence, some have food independence, which is dwindling. If you had an Anglosphere, this kind of an Anglosphere, and we've seen it strategically already going back to the Second World War and the First World War. But if it became economic, nobody else could really dictate to it. Grain production in the steppes of Russia and Ukraine have obviously decreased because of the war. The American and Canadian Great Plains, it's the breadbasket of the world now. Well, it always was, but now it's an even bigger breadbasket of the world. China is not food independent. Between the United States, Canada, and Australia, you have humongous mineral independence, and you would have energy independence. Biden is not as committed to it as Trump was, but at least Trump thinks about it, was thinking about it, and so is Nigel Farage, and so is the British government. So they want Britain to become the European flank of this new Anglosphere. Britain will have to build up its defense spending in that regard for those three reasons: Ukraine, post-Brexit, operational capacity, and an Anglosphere.
That's very interesting. I just have to wonder, Jacob, I mean, traditional enemies, of course, we don't speak of this, but like Germany, if they see the UK building up their defenses, Would that maybe cause an arms race in Europe?
Not so much an arms race in terms of conflict, because they're all NATO members for the time being, but certainly an arms race in terms of marketing military hardware and weapons to third country purchases.
Got it. Yeah.
This is a big deal, and this is a very big deal in India right now. India was getting 85% of its weapons from Russia. Now it's only getting about 55%. It's buying more from Britain and more from the United States. So when you see the British defense budget increasing, remember, it's not just about Britain or about NATO or even about the Anglosphere. It's about the British arms market and British arms exports.
The next topic we had down was the BRICS conference that happened this week. I open the floor to you gentlemen about BRICS meeting this week.
What you had was foreign ministers speaking informally in preparation for a bigger conference, tentatively scheduled to take place, I think, in August in St. Petersburg. But because of the war in the Ukraine, that may not be engraved in stone as to where it would be. But what's happening now with BRICS, with Saudi Arabia coming into it, moving away from the United States, which is partly due to the disastrous foreign policies and incompetence of the Joe Obama administration, of Obama, who's really pulling the strings for Biden, obviously. That incompetence has done a number of things. And you'll see the fastest growing third world market, India, and China, and Saudi Arabia, and Russia, and Brazil, and South Africa, being the major economies among this consortium of 81 countries. Now, if you put all of them together, including Saudi Arabia, you have something that rivals the G7. You have something that rivals the G7. No other currency, the euro couldn't do it, the yuan will never do it. Obviously, the ruble won't do it. The Indian rupee won't do it. No currency is going to replace the dollar as the world currency reserve. What they might try, though, is to get a BRIC currency. Try to do what the EU did with the euro. Get a common currency used among all of these countries, okay? A common currency used among all these countries to replace the dollar as the basis of the world currency reserve. The most, and obviously Bitcoins are never going to be the world currency reserve. The most logical response to this, howbeit not preferred, but the most logical response would be something I've been saying for 35 years. All you would need is an exchange rate mechanism, an ERM, between the American Federal Reserve and the European Central Bank. The European Central Bank is essentially the old German Bundesbank with a new name. All you would need is a one-for-one exchange rate fixed between the dollar and the euro, which they could do by using interest rates to keep the exchange rate in check. These other BRIC currencies, moreover, are more gold-backed, and gold can be very, very fluctuating in its value at any given time. Look at South Africa. South Africa is on the brink of an economic collapse. If it didn't have gold bullion, it would have collapsed. Gold cannot be either understated or overstated. But the BRIC currency would tend to be more gold-backed, and they're beginning to say even backed by other precious metals, but more so by rare earth metals. Rare earth minerals are all over the place. You can get them almost anywhere, but they're labor intensive. That's why China has dominated the market. It just takes so much human resource to produce it. So they could tried to make a BRIC currency to challenge the dollar. A euro, what the euro tried to be for Europe, but didn't really succeed too well. They could try to do that for BRIC. And I imagine there'll be players who will. The other problems that BRIC has is Russia and India are not the best of friends at the moment, but Russia and China have a friendship of convenience. Long-term enemies remain enemies, but in the short term, they have a friendship of convenience. Mao and Stalin did not made a friendship of convenience, but even communism did not keep the friendship between Russia and China. Nothing will in the long term, but in the short term, you have that. China is the enemy of India. It is a threat to India. Everybody in India knows it. China also has always had a foot in backing Pakistan, India's enemy. So within the BRIC, who's going to lead it? Obviously, China will want to. But now India is overtaking China as the world's most populous country. And it is on the road to potentially being the next China, as China took the economic domination from Asia, from Japan. India has the prospect of taking it from China, has a bigger market, has more scientists and engineers per capita. It's English speaking. It's somewhat democratic, and it has ties to the English speaking democracies. And it's considered a better capital investment base. So while China will want to see BRICS as a way to control things, much the same as the United States did, and Britain did at other times in history, the problem is going to be India. Will India go towards an Anglosphere, or will it go towards BRICS? There's no easy solution to India's relationship with China. They can try to say it's purely economic, but it won't be. It's impossible to be at strategic odds with somebody and think you can do business with them without the strategic prospects of conflict being a factor in the equation, and vice versa. It just doesn't work. So that is one problem, the India-China factor. And China obviously wants to dominate over Russia, which the Ukraine is hoping it to do. So BRICS has its own problems. I don't think in the short term it's going to threaten the United States dollar or the G7 short term. Longer term, that remains to be seen. And the country to keep your eye on in this regard is certainly India, and the role that India is going to play. Now, there's one other thing I'd point out. Part of the reason for BRICS, the motive of these other countries to join it, is they're tired of the IMF, they're tired of the Bank of International Settlements, but more so in Geneva, but more so the IMF and the World Bank. They're tired of the G7 countries dictating terms of loans to these third world countries. They also don't like the political interference. The United States twisting the arm of Uganda, using economic threat as Hillary Clinton did, and as the Biden administration is doing again, to make African countries like Uganda liberalize their laws on homosexuality and lesbianism, trying to force this Western decadent culture on third world countries. Remember, as much as we may not like China, and as much as we may not like Russia, they have far more conservative positions concerning heterosexuality and preserving heterosexuality as the social and cultural norm. The reason these countries are rising up as threats to the West is because of the moral bankruptcy of the West, certainly evidenced in the area of the LGBTQ thing. Another aspect of this, and I need to close this, is China is becoming increasingly resented in Africa. A lot of the BRIC countries in Africa don't like China because China is basically buying up Africa and economically colonizing it. This is a problem. So It's the G7 against BRICS. But I don't expect anything earth-changing to happen in the near future, as many websites are saying. But it is happening. The outcome remains to be seen.
All right. Turning our attention a little bit to another region. The news this week, we had the Iranians testing a new missile. What does this mean for the region, and what does this specifically mean for Israel? Jacob.
Okay. First of all, when the Iranians test these new missiles, there's two reasons they do it. They may actually be testing the actual missiles themselves for accuracy, for range, for reliability and performance, and so forth, testing the avionics packages, the guidance systems, and so forth, and also the interceptability. There's the obvious reason. But the other is, it is a show, a display, not for external consumption, but for internal consumption. They want the people to believe that Iran is an emerging power, which, thanks to Barack Obama, it is. Thanks to the treason and the betrayal of the Obama administration and of John Kerry and of Joe Biden and Hillary Clinton, it is. The question is to what degree. Now, notice this. What this does is it fuels the move to the political right in Israel. The ramification in Israel is it moves people away from a left-wing voting predisposition towards a right-wing voting predisposition. They want a hawk, somebody who's stronger on defense. The next thing you saw this same week is the United States putting on display the GBU 57A/B MOP, Massive Ordnance Penetrator. These can take out the underground Nantes tunnel systems in Iran. And there are new weapons that are being tested in the United States that use penetration blades. B-2s can already launch the MOPs, and they can be based in San Diego Garcia, near Iran in itself. So when Iran puts on a show like this, or conducts these tests, the Americans respond. And that's what they've been doing. The other factor in this equation is the stupidity of the Obama administration in allowing China to broker a very rapprochement between Iran and Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia is less likely to be supportive of any attack on Iran, at least for the time being. We can thank the incompetence and stupidity of Obama, Harris, Blinken, and Austin, and Jake Sullivan for this, but we know that Susan Rice and Barack Obama were really on back of it. You're dealing with gross incompetence and betrayal of the national interest. So without having Saudi Arabia as a strategic platform adjacent to Iran, and having moved out of Afghanistan, you no longer have a platform that is easily utilizable to launch any kind of an attack or counterattack on Iran. The only way out of this is the use of long-range strategic weapons, the B-2. They're based in Missouri. They can be redeployed to Diego Garcia, for instance. And it may also be a factor in why the Biden administration is opening new American bases in Iraq. Remember, Obama unilaterally pulled out of Iraq. Once the war was essentially won and under control, once the surge of Petraeus worked, Obama pulled the American troops out of Iraq and handed it to ISIS. And then, being the idiot and the liar he is, he said that ISIS is a JV team. It's nothing serious. 1 to 2 weeks later, they're setting off bombs on subways in Brussels and Germany and all over Europe and threatening the United States. Again, you have the combination of incompetence and dishonesty of Barack Obama personally, but his administration, which at that time included, of course, Biden. So they've got to be able to get places in place that border Iran. Pakistan is out now. Afghanistan is out now. Carriers have their function, but they can only go so far. The small Gulf states have American bases, but there can be political restrictions on how much they can be used, such as in Kuwait, possibly Bahrain, and Qatar, which you can't trust as far as you can spit. They're also in bed with the Iranians because of the natural gas deposits that fields that they share under the Persian Gulf with Iran. So you've got a question here. How can you do it? If Iran became that much of a threat, the only way it could be done is the United States using B-2s and these MOP bombs and possibly the new blade bombs. If they're, we don't know, it's a secret how far the development is, acting in concert with the Israelis. That would be the only thing that would work. And it could work. But that's it.
Recently, it's come up that a lot of academics in the world are really pushing this idea of post-Zionism, which is, of course, they believe that the formation of Israel was the main goal of Zionism, and therefore, since in 1948 you had the formation of Israel, that largely Zionism should go away, because we've accomplished, mission accomplished, just like George Bush on the carrier in the first Iraq war. Zionism should go the way of the donkey, the history. Talk to me a little bit about the rising post-Zionism that's going on in the world, especially in the amongst the diasporic Jews in the world.
It's going on among diasporic Jews in the academic world, but it's particularly going on in Israel among academics. What are they saying? With the collapse of the Soviet Union and the immigration of Jews from the former Soviet Union into Israel, and with the high birth rate of Orthodox Jews, Israel's Jewish population has gone to 7 million. 7 million. In a country smaller than Delaware. Also, you've got 1.6, 1.7 million Arabs, plus some Druzes and others. Most of the Arabs are Muslims, some of the Arabs are Christian, and some of those are pro-Zionist, as are the Druzes, and you have also some pro-Zionist Muslims, such as Bedouins and the Circassians. But you've got a Jewish population of 7 million and growing. And the Orthodox, ultra-Orthodox particularly, have a high birth rate. Israel has built up its infrastructure considerably in the last 12 to 15 years. The rail system is much bigger and more efficient than it ever was. The highway system is better and bigger than it ever was, but it's still congested. Israel has become a crowded country. You can push somewhat into the Negev, except that a lot of the Negev is necessary for military maneuvers. It's not a big country. And where do you have brigade size military maneuvers? Where do you have maneuvers where you have 1,000 to 2,000 tanks in some cases? The Negev is the only place you can really do it on any kind of a scale. And similarly, the simulated dogfights and air combat training for Israeli jet fighters is mostly done over the Negev. So for strategic reasons, expansion into the Negev is a limited possibility. Although even there, Beersheba has grown, the Mona has grown somewhat, and Arad has grown. They've grown considerably. Eilat has also grown as more as a resort, rather a nice resort that became a tacky one with the growth. But you can only go so far with the growth in the Negev. Where else are you going to go? The only other place they can go is into the West Bank. Into the West Bank. You can build vertically, that is, put higher rise apartment blocks on the existing Jewish settlements, or you can expand horizontally. The Israelis have not been big on displacing Arabs or families from their land. They may try to purchase it, or if the land had been in Jewish hands before the pogroms of the 1920s, they may reacquire it through legal means. But they are not into going into Arab villages and saying you all have to leave. They've not done that. But now the question becomes, where are you going to put these people? Additionally, the Negev is kind of far from the port cities of Ashdod and Haifa. The only viable solution will be West Bank expansion. A lot of Israelis, particularly left-center Israelis, and particularly among the academic institutions, are saying the following. Israel should only allow immigration the way any other country does. The law of return should be abolished, repealed. It has served its purpose. We have a Jewish state. We no longer need one. It was a place for Holocaust survivors. It was a place for Falasha refugees. It was a place for refugees of Jews from the Soviet Union and so forth. It's fulfilled its purpose. We can't let people come back here and claim to be Israeli citizens just because they have one Jewish grandparent or whatever. We don't have the room. We don't have the resources. We don't have the ground to expand. We need to end it. So if somebody comes with a trade or profession or capital investment to make a new business, then we can give them a visa and the right of return. We can give them citizenship. We can give a Jewish scientist or engineer or businessman on a point system like other countries have, such as Australia. But the law of return that Israel has had, which is not all that different from the law of return of Germany or the Republic of Ireland, is outdated, they are saying. And they are saying this on the basis of demographics and geographical reality and population density, that being the factor. And of course, with the population density, there are environmental factors, pollution and so forth, traffic jam emissions and so forth. Well, the other thing they're saying is we can make one provision in the law of return that should there be a pogrom or should there be growing anti-Semitism in one country, then we can let Jews come in on the law of return if they come from that country. Well, that'll become a debate in itself because a lot of Jews have come from France in the last 10 to 12 years, simply because of the growth of Islam and growing anti-Semitism in France. Where are you going to decide where the Jewish population is under threat or not? So this is called post-Zionism. We have the state, we no longer have the land to absorb this many people. One possible ramification of post-Zionism or the post-Zionist environment will be to say the only way we can continue with a law of absorption any further, and what they're really concerned about is Orthodox Jews coming from the United States because they have huge families and they're getting more and more political control. The only way is to expand into the West Bank, where many religious Zionists want to live, which is ironical given the fact that the rabbis initially opposed Zionism. But now that there's a Jewish state, despite their opposition, they want to control it, which is another problem, both sociologically and culturally and politically in Israel. So this is post-Zionism, but it is becoming an issue. And it will certainly be a factor in any discussions about a so-called two-state solution. Where are you going to put the Jews? Such it is.
Just wanted to remind everyone that we will be going to backstage pretty soon. So if you're watching us on YouTube or Facebook or any of our other platforms, we will be going to Rumble to talk about some topics that Unfortunately, we cannot speak in the presence of our digital overlords like YouTube. So we're gonna go ahead and actually another topic that was brought up, I believe by David Lister. It was the investigation, the IRS, who has a huge infusion of cash, is gonna be investigating Matt Taibbi. And for those who don't recall, Matt Taibbi is the reporter that covered the Twitter files of government collusion between Twitter and the Department of Justice, as well as the FBI. So it seems that Matt is in trouble with the IRS. David, I believe you had some comments about this.
Well, this is one of the problems after the IRS got $86 billion to hire more agents. Okay, so they had some agent come out a couple of days before Christmas, serving him with concerns about his tax form. Taibbi says this is quite a surprise for him. Okay, because he had gotten money back on that return, and from what it seems, he's owed more money. So, but they wanted to alert him to problems, and they alerted him right before he was to go and speak to the Congress. So it's quite shocking the way that the government is taking these whistleblowers or journalists that are exposing them, and they're trying to shut them down. They did this with the men that exposed the FBI. They nearly destroyed their lives, and they're just letting people know, look, if you speak out against us, we will crush you. And Taibbi is, like you said, he was surprised that this happened, but he shouldn't be surprised, because all of us. Now, one of the things the Republicans are trying to do is claw back some of that $86 billion in this budget fight. I think they want $10 billion clawed back in this year's budget. So it's, I think, don't be surprised if you see the IRS coming to visit you or me or any of us, because they want to shut up dissent.
Again, a political police force like the FBI, like anything else in the deep state, it's just a political police force operating under the guise of legitimacy of collecting tax revenue. It's oversized. It needs to be abolished. It's something that the country got along quite well with in the first century and a half of its existence. We didn't need it then, and we don't need the IRS in its present form, at least now. But there it is. And it's not there only, or maybe not even necessarily primarily, as a tax collecting agency of government, but again, it's a political police force. We saw this with a woman who should die in prison, Lois Lerner. She was giving tax deductible 501(c)(3)s on behalf of the IRS only to left-wing political organizations. More conservative, pro-life organizations were not getting it. Now, this woman should die in jail. She pleaded the Fifth Amendment. She's as guilty as sin. I would love to see that woman in prison for the rest of her life, but she's not going to be, because of the corruption of the government. She was IRS. This is not new. It's simply gotten worse, as David said, because of the increased funding given to the IRS, which it should not have.
So pay your taxes, everybody. Render to Caesar what is Caesar's. And if I could bring up something else dealing with the IRS and with, if you wouldn't mind.
Go for it, dude, please.
Okay. Well, we've had a wonderful ruling from the Supreme Court. It seems that they overrode the Environmental Protection Agency when it comes to the policies on water. This water policy, Obama wanted to control all water. That means if you had a little bitty pond that you dug on your own property, he wanted to regulate it. You had a little ditch that filled up with water twice a year in the rainy season, he wanted to regulate it. But the Constitution says that the government regulation of the waterways is for transportation. And so it did get expanded under environmental protection to at least try to make sure that there are not pollutants from mines and other things flowing into the waterways. But what they're trying to do is go too far. And so the vote came down to stop the Environmental Protection Agency for this couple building a home up in North Dakota. And it came down as 9-0. Well, the opposition party, the Senate Majority Leader, not McConnell, Schumer. Chuck Schumer said, this is a MAGA court. Now, again, it was 9-0. And so you're seeing that they want to control everything everywhere. And now the court is in opposition to them. So they want to load up the court. So there's nothing in our government that the Democrat wants out of their control. We need to really pray that they're removed from power, and especially in the upcoming election. May God bring us up some godly leaders.
Amen.
Please, Lord. Just wanted to kind of touch a little bit about it, but the IRS was weaponized against originally against the gangsters in Chicago. Alphonse Capone, of course, went to jail for evading his income tax. So if it can be weaponized against mobsters, just wait till it's weaponized against Christians, against conservatives, against anyone they deem as politically undesirable, which that seems to be the writing on the wall.
Nixon weaponized it against his political opponents. Barack Obama weaponized it with Lerner and so forth. What's interesting, though, about Matt Taibbi is they didn't go after him because he owed any taxes. They went after him claiming they were afraid for 2 years that someone else had stolen his identity with no reason, no proof of it, no evidence ever given to him, and he didn't owe any taxes. Not only that, but the agents came to his house on a Saturday, Christmas Eve. Saturday, Christmas Eve, right after he spoke out.
Wow. Yeah, it's a crazy world in which we live. Well, I want to thank everybody who has joined us for this part of the broadcast, catching up with Jacob. Thank you for our viewers on YouTube, on Facebook. We will now be heading to backstage. So if you really want to continue to hear about what we think about some topics that we can't show here, please migrate over to Rumble or go over to our channels on RTN, or also you can watch it continued on Vimeo. But for now, we bid you adieu, and we hope to see you soon.
Some good stuff coming up.